Okay, everyone, welcome to the last Q&A, the final Q&A. I, of course, will still be available by Discord, but this is the last lecture you guys will be sharing with me tonight. You know, the four of you who are here. Everybody else is just missing out. Okay, so tonight the name of the game is texturing. Full-on, hardcore texturing. I'll be on Discord if you guys have more questions, but you guys will always have access to the Discord server. At least if your naming conventions are correct. If you screw up your name, though, I'm going to kick you. Get a cookie for attending. No, cookies are not that easy to obtain. You have to answer a question. All right. An important thing while we are in the beginning stages of the Q&A. All projects are not due on Monday this week. They are due on Sunday. This is because it's the end of the month and I cannot extend the deadline past Sunday. I can do extensions, but it wouldn't let me set the deadline for Monday. No problem. I had to fix a router issue right before the lecture started. That's why it was not open early. Okay. So, aside from all the projects being due early, a day early, things are pretty much the same. You guys are going to be picking one of your two environments that you did last week for materials, and you're going to be applying full-on textures. Now, while every object in your scene did need a material last week, not absolutely everything is going to need a texture. We will talk about that subtlety tonight. Do we get extra credits for both scenes? No, we don't do extra credit, guys. We stopped doing extra credit when the majority of people who were asking for extra credit were students who were not doing the projects correctly. So they're like, can I do extra credit instead of doing the projects correctly? And we're like, no, you need to learn how to do the projects correctly. Also, I would actually prefer that you do Project 7 as well as you can. We get a lot of people who are very challenged with Project 7, so I would actually rather you do one scene well than do two scenes okay. Yep, there's nothing much else to go on. This week is just Project 7 and your discussion. Whew, I got a lot of grading from last week, though. I've got 2 projects from each of you, a discussion, and a research. Ugh. Should really move that research out into week 4 again. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about textures. Actually, before we begin this part, let's talk about your reference for the week. So there's a little bit of confusion I always get on this, so I want to make sure to clear it up. So let's just grab an incognito window. Now, for this week, you guys are going to be looking up textures. You're going to be looking up images that we're going to use for textures. So let's go back to our good old concrete floor. It's like it remembers from last week. Okay, so we're going to be looking up images like this to use as our source image to build our texture off of. Now, here is the question. For your reference, on the top of the template, do I want you to give me this, or do I want you to give me the exact same images you gave me last week for your material reference? What do you guys think? This is a cookie chance. Also, 50 best ideas for concrete. What? Is it? So let's see. I've only got 4 of you in here. So Randy says different. I don't know what that means. Crystal says the same. Gabe says swirly. Crystal says same images. Well, Crystal, you would be correct. You get the cookie. I want the same images you gave me last week. The only exceptions being if you, for some reason, want to change where you are deciding to go with your composition. So, for example, you did something, you had reference for something last week, and you want to change it up, then you can get new reference. But I want the same type of reference. I want, pictures of, like this is what I want for concrete. Well, better resolution. I want something like this, not something like this. This is a texture, not reference. Reference is what you gave me last week, and I want reference. Now, the other exception is if you get feedback from me on your grade saying that your reference didn't count or your reference is not good enough. If you get that feedback, of course, change your reference so that you get a better grade. But what I'm specifically saying is don't give me this stuff. I don't want this. I want this. Why are all these images so dang tiny? I want this. Give me this. Not this. All right. Really quickly, let's take a look at this concrete. It's got some good reference images. Oh, wow, that's crazy. Yes. Yes, I will have to look more at this later. Okay. So, I know, it's because I made a new incognito, it doesn't have my filter set. All right. So, you are going to be downloading images off the internet to use as a starting point. We are going to be adjusting them in Photoshop. We have to make them tileable, and we have to make them suit our reference. And that may mean that we have to adjust some of the colors, some of the levels, some of that sort of thing, and definitely make it tiled. We're not just stealing images off the internet. We have to do some Photoshop work to at least change the images up a little bit, and they should be kind of fitting with our color palette better anyway. So it's a little bit more tuning that we're doing, not just building textures. Now, let's talk about the different types of texture maps you guys will be using. The most simple map, the one everybody thinks of, is the diffuse map. This is a base texture. This is what you're going to plug into your color channel. There's really not much to talk about this one. This is what you guys are used to thinking of when you think of a color map. Now, in addition to that, you guys are going to be responsible for bump maps. Bump maps are black and white images that will do sort of like surface detail-y bump stuff. A good example is like if you guys have walls in your house and they have like texture on them, that texture is not going to be in the color map. It's going to be in the bump map because the wall is one color, but it has this kind of faux texture on it that is actually bump. You guys want to know about displacement maps, you got to look at the campus lecture. It is a thing we cover. I'm not going to get into it tonight. Gabe was asking about bump map or displacement maps in the chat. So yeah, black and white, bump detail. White is positive, above the surface. Black is pushed back into the surface. So spec maps are, as I like to call them, reflection maps. Spec map is a bit of an old term. It encompasses a lot of different types of maps. And in truth, there are several different types of spec maps. The one that you guys are going to be probably dealing with, if you deal with this at all, is going to be a primary specular face color map. Where you're going to plug it, where you would plug it in. Most realistically, you are probably not going to actually deal with this unless you have a few specific cases. And then there is a roughness map. You guys have heard me talk about roughness at length this month. That is because roughness is kind of the new deal when it comes to specularity maps. And so, yes, a roughness map is a spec map. It's just a backwards spec map. And by that, I mean it's a little weird because where you have specularity and shininess, it's typically black because it's not very rough. It's very smooth. But where you have a lot of roughness, you don't have a lot of specularity, and it is therefore white because it's rough. It's backwards, I know, but you'll get used to it. Actually, now spec maps screw me up. These old school things, because I'm used to thinking this way. Okay, so let's start here. I want somebody to give me an example of a diffuse color map that doesn't have any bump or specularity in the texture, but you would need a texture for the diffuse. Okay, guys, there's only 4 of you. You can't sit there going, somebody else answer. All of you have to try. It's not really that hard. There are many correct answers. Just try. Pick something. You need to name a texture that is going to need a color map or a diffuse map, but is not going to need a texture for bump map or specular or roughness. There's a few obvious ones. Just color. Now, that doesn't mean it isn't going to need anything in the material to define those. Jolene's got it. Hardwood floor. Jolene, here's your Triforce cookies. So, hardwood floor, right? No bump detail. So Gabe is going, but that needs a reflection map, right? A reflection map, in this case a spec map is what we're talking about, a map that you would plug into specular edge color, only defines differences in how specular it is. Just because something is reflective doesn't mean it needs a spec map. If it is uniformly reflective across the entire surface, it doesn't need a spec map. Because anything that is defined by a single value does not need a texture to define how that surface is going to look. You only need a texture when there is more detail than 1 pixel in the texture. Okay. Yeah, I mean, gold bars, that would just be, I mean, here's the simplest example, guys. The thermos in your scene. It's just brushed metal. You're not going to need a texture on it at all. Okay, now I want you guys to tell me a texture that is going to need a bump map, but not a color map. And honestly, probably not a specular and roughness map. But the important part of this question, needs a bump map, no color. Nope, the bread needs a color map. Good try, Randy. It does need a bump map, though, so you are halfway there. The knife, why would the knife need a bump map? Okay, if you're going to put scratches on it, no, but if you're going to put scratches on it, you'd probably need a color map. Or more importantly, you need a roughness map. Anybody else? Nope, rusty metal will need a color map. See, this is the trick. A lot of things are going to need color maps, but not all of them. The cutting board is wood grain. Wood grain is going to need a color map. And actually, a new cutting board doesn't need a bump map. A used one would, which is why we would use Substance Painter, which is what I did in the lecture today. Lecture 9, it's all about substance. Okay, guys, let's think. I gave you an example before. Don't think of things that are specifically in the scene. Think of types of textures. I gave you the example before of a wall that has like a texture on it. In Florida, we have a lot of these orange peel type walls, they call it. It's got a pattern on it and the texture, and then it's just paint over it. So the paint is one color, but the wall itself has bump. Randy, you said the outside wall in the night scene, but what are you putting on the outside wall in the night scene? Don't think about the models in your scenes. Think about objects in the real world. Yes, Gabe, like stucco. A brick wall. I'll give you half a point, Randy, if you can, and I'll give you the full point if you can continue with that train of thought, because there are circumstances where a brick wall would not need a color map. Can you tell me why it needs bump and doesn't need a color map? Because by default, a brick wall is going to have bricks, and then it's going to have the mortar, and they're going to be a different color. Um, all right, you guys are kind of dancing over it, but here's the obvious one that I'm going to throw at you. Anything that has texture, has bump, like the things you've just been naming, like stone, concrete, brick wall, cinder block wall, anything like that that has been painted over with a nice thick layer of paint is going to have some of that original texture in it. Also think of like a wood deck that's been stained. It's going to be one color though, because the paint is taking the color, but it still has that surface texture. Anything like that is going to be bump, but no color. You also could have gone with like a plastic tablecloth that's one color. Gabe, you said the interior wall, but what is the interior wall? You have to define what that material is. Paint, but paint is over something. So, paint on stucco, yes. Anyway, we'll move on. Okay. Nope. Marble countertops would need a color map. Actually, they wouldn't need a bump map at all. The point I'm trying to get across to you guys is that you need to be thinking about your reference and actually examining it and thinking, do I need a bump map in this? Do I need a color map in this? Because sometimes you may not need one. It's all on your reference. Again, this is why getting critiques on Discord is so important. Now, let's talk about reflection maps. I want you guys to name anything that you think is going to need a spec map or a roughness map. Let's just say a roughness map, because a roughness map is a spec map. Name anything that you think is going to need that. Wine bottle, no, doesn't need one. Just needs a default specular value. Just needs the default material values. Bread, nope, doesn't need it. Uniform specularity, uniform reflectivity across the surface. The tablecloth, again, uniform specularity. Unless there's some dirt on it, then you might need it, but then you're going into Substance Painter for that. Again, you guys are naming things in the scene. I want you to name different types of materials. Silk, no. Silk is going to be a uniform specularity across the surface. I'm hoping poop was like a swear word. You're not suggesting poop. A towel, again, a towel has uniform specularity. It's okay that you're confused. That's why we're going over this. So, you guys are confusing the fact that an object has specularity with the fact that it needs a specularity map. Again, it only needs the texture plugged into it if there are differences in specularity on the material itself. A dirty face coin? Yeah, sure. If it's dirty, it's going to have places that are going to be more specular and less specular. A cheese rind, no, that is probably going to have a uniform case of specularity across the surface. Dirty coin so far is the best one we got. I'll give Randy a Zerg Rush worth of cookies for that one. How about this? I want you guys to name some materials, and I will tell you if those materials would or would not need a spec map or roughness map. So far, the best one we got is a coin with the dirty face. Randy, you earned that one. That's actually a hard question. But Randy did stumble on an interesting point. For the most part, you guys are not going to need spec map or roughness maps, because for the most part, things that are in your scene that are clean and that are brand new have uniform specularity. It's things that are dirty, that are aged, that are scratched, that have been used, that need that difference in roughness. In fact, this is actually why roughness maps exist, because we want things that look like they're older, like they've been used. So anything that has scratches in it, like a cutting board that's been used, or that has smudgy fingerprints on it. Here's an example. I have a brand new iPad, right? Frank likes to use this one in lab. I have a brand new iPad. The screen is super, super nice and clean. Does that need a spec map? Okay, you guys are saying no, but that's correct. But is it reflective? So, how would you define the reflectivity of the surface in Maya? More specifically in RenderMan, because we're using a Pixar surface shader. But how would you define that? No, I mean, how would you go about creating that level of specularity on your material in Maya? How would you do that? You guys should be able to do that based on your assignments from last week. You've got a clean iPad glass screen. How do you do that? You select the object, you put a material on it. What do you do to that material? Okay, forget about the fact that it's glass, because we don't actually have to make it transparent. Someone said adjust the specular roughness. You'd also need to adjust the specular face color. And that's it. That's all you have to do for a clean iPad screen. Now I'm going to give this to somebody's kids for about 20 minutes and then take it back. How's that screen going to look? Marred, specifically. Be more specific. Smudgy. Fingerprints all over it. Probably snot or something, because in my mind, kids are always full of snot. Now, can we use that material that we just set up to still define the way that this iPad looks now? Okay, the answer is no. It's got fingerprints on it. We've got areas that are not as reflective as other areas because the fingerprints are decreasing the reflectivity, specifically in the areas where they are. The iPad screen itself is still clean, but it's got all this gunk on it. So we have to use a texture to define where those fingerprints are. This is where we need a roughness map. This is where we need that specularity map. Because we're going to have to go in, and where those fingerprints are, we're going to have to put a big old white fingerprint on our spec map to tell RenderMan, hey, this has roughness right here where this kid put his finger. And there, and there, and there, and there, and there. Everywhere this kid put his fingers. Roughness. You guys understand it a little bit better? If you're still having troubles, go watch Lecture 9. It just uploaded. I go into Substance Painter, and we talk about this sort of detailing and damaging of objects quite a bit. To be honest, though, I could use a week teaching you guys just this concept. Gabe, what do you mean by where the map would be placed? Do you mean where the fingerprints would be on the iPad? Oh, where we're going to plug it in? We'll go over that. Here's the shorthand answer, Gabe. There is no specular channel. Is there? So we can't plug it into the specular channel because that doesn't exist. We can plug it into primary specular roughness. That's a channel, and I can put a texture in it. See, this is the exact reason I don't like the term spec map, because it's a little misleading. It is a correct term, and it is what we used 10 years ago, but as specularity has evolved with the technology evolving, spec maps are 5 different categories now. I can have 5 spec maps. I can have a specular face color map. I can have a specular edge color map. I can have a specular roughness map. I can have an index or refraction map. I can have a, what's that last one? I can't remember the last one. It's the other thing that we adjust in the physical material. Not anthroposcopic. I could have an anthroposcopic map, though. Anything that's a value, I can plug a texture into it. Don't know why I'd want to do that to anthroposcopic, but I could do it. I feel like I got a little bit too into that. All right. So, let's calm down. Let's chill. And we are going to make some texture maps. So, let's go over to Photoshop. Now, I'm going to make 2 texture maps tonight. I am going to make a cutting board, and I am going to make a ceramic tile floor. The reason I'm going with the tile floor is because, honestly, it's the only thing that I can think of that is a textured object with a difference in roughness and specularity that I don't want to take into Substance Painter. Everything else I could think of, I would be like, well, realistically, I would probably take this into Painter, and that's how I would do that. Okay, Randy. So here's our cutting board texture. Here Here is our, where is our, give me a second. Here's our cutting board reference. And then where's my ceramic tile floor reference? Nope. Nope. Here it is. My tiled floor reference. And then here is my starting point, I think. There, yeah. So, let's start with the cutting board. Ooh, it's so tiny. Hang on. Okay. Ah! So I'm just going to put this up here as my reference. And dang it. There's a little lock. Lock that bad boy. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and recreate this. The first thing we're going to have to do with any texture is we're going to have to make sure it tiles. So make sure it tiles. First off, I always like to make sure it's a square image. So I'm going to go to image size and actually cancel. Canvas size. And I'm going to take this to pixels. So 2143. Okay. Proceed. And then image. We will make this 2048 because I like powers of 2. Oh, we cropped our reference a little bit. That's fine. Now, here is the tricky thing. If I go and I offset this, well, there's a big old right down the center. Now, this is going to be an issue because if I was to repeat this, and let's go ahead here and I'm going to actually copy this. And so, boop, 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 boop. Dang it. Stupid new thing being different that I'm not used to. Now, problem is I can see where each one of these tiles is. Not so much vertically, but horizontally, it's very obvious where those new tiles are. Yes, the newer versions of Photoshop, it always does universal transform. You actually have to hold shift not to universal transform instead of holding shift to universal transform. Now, the fact that I can see those tiles is a problem, especially if I'm going to bring that into my actual scene and have it repeat like that. No, Gabe, there's nothing wrong with your Photoshop. They changed how it works. Which, it makes more sense the way they're doing it. The problem is, I've been doing Photoshop since 2003, and it's worked that way since 2003, and now they changed it. My head's like, no! It does make more sense, though. Is the good thing to do, right thing to do. They just should have done it 15 years ago. Okay. It's weird. I got a lot of energy. I've been up early, so I should actually be low on energy. Anyway, so we have to fix that tiling. And the way we do that is we do the offset thing that I just did. But we have to do some more work to this. Here's where the stylus is going to come in really handy. We're going to use the good old clone stamp tool. And what this does is I can sample an area and then I go and paste that area somewhere else. So let's say, let's say that I sample, this knot here. Well, I can put that knot over here and the texture around it so it kind of blends in. That doesn't seem particularly useful. What is useful is sampling an area that looks neutral. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Boop. And taking that neutral area and painting over an area that has problems. Now, some new problems may arise, as they are, but that's okay, because we'll just sample a new area. You do have to be careful, because I am getting a little bit of weirdness. Nope. There we go. Ah, bugger. Question, on the clone stamp, will it work in the diagonal sense? Nope. Okay. Now I am trying to line up the way the texture is horizontally because it actually tiles quite well horizontally. But normally, if this didn't have like a wood grain pattern, I could sample one area and place it anywhere as long as it matched up. Yes, it sometimes looks patchy in certain areas. I could spend more time and make it look better, but there's actually quite a bit of craft involved in this. Again, in the campus lecture, Tony Saxon spends 45 minutes to an hour doing just this. I cannot do that because we would not have much of a lecture if I did. So with that done, I can then go to Filter, Offset, and now it looks better. Now, after that, I would have to do a little bit of color matching. This looks a little bit more red, so I could go in here and I could go to say color balance, and I could actually pull some of the red out. There we go. Looks pretty good. Yeah. And so with that, we could save this out. You don't see any difference. Look, red, yellow, red, yellow. It's subtle, but it's there. Make sure I don't have my flux going. Yeah, it's disabled for Photoshop. Good. Okay. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to put it in my Demo Depot cutting board. Targa. Okay. So, what is the Pixar format? I don't know. I didn't see it. I don't want to know what it is. So, guys, for the cutting board, we have our color map. Do we need a roughness map? Or, I mean, do we need a bump map, height map? Gabe, you say no. You've earned a cookie, but first you have to tell me why did you say no? Because it's smooth. You said planar. The correct word is smooth. But it's smooth. There's no scratches or anything like that. This is a pretty new cutting board. Gabe, here's your cookies. You earned it. So, we actually don't need a roughness map. We don't need a spec map. We don't need a bump map. At least not for a brand new cutting board. If you want to see more on how to take this idea of a cutting board and actually make it look like a used cutting board that's going to have some cool like wear and tear on it, watch my lecture 9. I'm going to actually pick up exactly after this point where we have the cutting board texture, and we're going to take that into Substance and we're going to do some cool stuff to it. Now, I don't have time to do that in this lecture, and we need to talk about more Photoshop stuff because Photoshop's kind of a required part of the class, and as much as I hate to admit it, Substance Painter is not. I do love Substance Painter. So, let's go on to this tile floor where we actually have some different tiles with some different levels of specularity. So, put this up here, put a lock on it, and now I've got to do a couple of things. First off, if we were to tile our background, we would have a problem. So we got to fix that. And the way I fix that is I go to Select, All, and then I use the navigator, and I use the color picker. Where's my color picker? Why can't I find it? There it is. Actually, I probably could just do this. Boop. And then, oh, I need it on a new layer. Image, Edit, stroke. 5 pixels is usually actually too much. I think I only need 3 pixels. Boop. And then filter offset. How the bugger did that happen? Oh, I know how. It's because I didn't collapse them yet. Hang on. Bevel and emboss. Usually does it. And then collapse them. And then filter offset. Yeah! Yeah! Okay. Cool. That's what I wanted. So, a couple of things we got to do to change this, right? We got to change our color map quite a bit. And then we're going to generate a bump and a roughness. All I did was use the stroke to add a border and then do a bevel and emboss with the layer effect. Don't worry about that. That's not particularly what we're going to be going over what to do because that was like a special quick fix thing. So first off, let's get the color matching. So I'm going to do an adjustment layer. Adjustment layers are here. And let's go ahead and let's make some adjustments to the color. I want it to be a little bit more yellowy, but I want it more red as well. Definitely more yellow. Maybe a little bit more magenta. No, maybe a little bit more green, actually. Okay, and then I can actually go to like shadows. Shadows, I want more red. And then highlights. All right. So we're kind of getting a little bit closer to that color. I think I probably shouldn't have put this so high. -2. So. We do cover this in the campus lecture a little bit. Adjustment layers are what we're going over. Adjustment layers are kind of things that adjust everything. If you're more confused, come to Discord and you can ask me questions. So if you have specific questions, you can ask those. But if you're like, I'm confused, then I don't really know what to do. So as you can see, here's what the adjustment layer is doing. This is the image. This is the image with the adjustment. I've adjusted the color to be closer to the reference. Now, I may have made it a little bit too saturated, which adjustment layers have a tendency of doing. So we are going to use another adjustment layer, a color balance over saturated. So we're going to use another one. And this one, hue, saturation, and value, I always find to be hilarious because nobody ever uses hue or lightness. So nobody ever changes the hue or the value. You just suck the saturation out of it. That's all we ever do hue, saturation, and value for. Yeah, don't ever use the hue. Here, I'll show you what it does. It just makes it look like a disco rave. It's awful. Set it back to 0. Don't touch it. The lightness is the same. Like, it doesn't do a very good job of adjusting the lightness. So instead of messing with that, we're going to do a levels. And so what this allows us to do is kind of adjust our contrast a little bit better. So I can go a little bit more, actually I want to go a little bit more in this direction. And then I want to make it a little bit darker overall. There we go. I think that's actually looking pretty good. Now, the major problem here is that My grout is dark. It shouldn't be dark. Oh, who asked you, Amy? My dog is a critic. So, what I'm actually going to do now, I'm going to use the magic wand. And so I'm going to select this color here. And then I'm going to use, oh, hang on. It will screw me if I don't turn that off. And then I'm going to go to similar. And it's going to select everything that is a similar value across the whole image. And what I'm going to do to this one now is I'm going to make an adjustment layer. I'm going to use invert. And I'm going to put a mask on it. Actually, that mask looks terrible. Delete layer mask. Close that. Similar. No. Yes. Yes, that's what I want. Okay. And then mask. Where did my selection go? All right. Yes. Yes. That's what I wanted. And then I'm going to take this. I'm actually going to stick it above this levels. Oh, that looks blue now. Never mind. I'm going to take it back down below all this. Now, if I put my reference back on, that should be a little bit brownish. So I'm actually going to do a color balance to that. So what I actually do, so I'm going to hold command and select my selection again. And this time I'm going to make another color balance. But I'm going to put it on top of all this stuff. Actually, probably here. And then I need a little bit more yellow in there and a little bit more red. And it's only adjusting, notice this, it's only adjusting inside those little lines. I could probably put this on top of the saturation. So there we go. We've done a little nifty adjustment layering for the color. And it's not too bad. I could do better, but I'd spend an hour doing it, and we don't have that kind of time. So I'm going to go ahead and grab all of these, and I'm going to put them in a folder, or I'm going to name that color. Sweet. So now, do we need, for the bump map, do we need, for the tile, do we need a bump map? Well, it's tile. It's ceramic tile. Ceramic tile smooth? Let's look at a reference. Is that smooth? Across the whole plane of geometry? No. We need to add some, we need a bump map. So, you could do like a black and white color or something. That's an adjustment layer. I honestly just like to take this, copy it. So Command A to select all, Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and we have another base. And then I do Command Shift U to desaturate. Instead of doing that, I could do an adjustment layer and do like black and white, but Command Shift U to saturate. Or you go in here, I think it's adjustments and desaturate somewhere around here. There it is. Okay, so the problem with this is that we have a lot of contrast in here that we don't particularly need. So we want our cracks to still be a high contrast from our flat tile, but our flat tile's got too much going on. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do another levels to this. And you go down there. So now we're going to try and get rid of some of the contrast in here. I'm going to be like, boop, boop, boop. Oh, wait, other way. There we go. Look, there's less contrast in the tile. And then actually probably bring this down a little bit because we don't need a lot of like, there we go. We don't need it to be white because white will raise it up. But we do want the contrast. So there we go. That's kind of our bump map. We got a little bit going on in here, but basically we want a lot of difference there. Actually, I want to bring this back up. No, white is the height. So think of this less as a bump map and more of a height map, which is what I like to call it. Black is the lowest height. White is the highest height. Anywhere where there's difference in color or where there's contrast, you're going to get bump. So, guys, I realize textures are confusing. We have a week to cover textures, and as we were talking about on Discord, I could easily do a 10-week class to teach you guys just textures. Okay, so that is all we're going to do to our bump map. It's a black and white map, so we don't have to deal with color or saturation. It's just value, which means just levels. So I'm going to go ahead and add a folder. Name this one bump. Boop. And we're going to drag both of these into there. Now, do we need a specular map or a roughness map? Yes. Why do we need a specular map or a roughness map, Gabe? I'll turn on my reference so you can look at that and ponder. Ponder, 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 ponder. The tiles are on a smooth surface. Okay, but then couldn't we just have our smoothness, our roughness really low and our reflectivity pretty high? Wouldn't that give us a smooth surface? I mean, it would give us a smooth surface, but would that give us the tiles we're looking for? I don't know what you're talking about with divots, but that's not quite what I'm looking for. Jillian, spec is kind of roughness. They're kind of the same thing. When we get back into Maya, I'll talk more about this. It's actually why I don't want like people saying spec maps anymore. Okay. Spec maps are a thing of the past. The reason, and here, Gabe, you did answer half correct, so I'll give you some Cinco de Mayo cookies. They've got M&M's inside. The reason we can't is because of the grout. The geometry is just a flat plane. We need the grout to have a lower level of reflectivity than the tile itself. So let's go ahead and let's make we'll start with a specular face color map. That's what we're going to call it. We won't call it a spec map. It's a specular face color map. So again, Command-Shift-U, and then we're going to make another levels. So what we want here is we want to define reflectivity. So how reflective on a scale of 0 to 1 is the surface of the tile? I'd say it's more reflective than a 3. Well, a 0.3. Because that's not very reflective. I'd say at least a 7, 7.5, or 8, which means that this value here has to be at like a 7.5 or an 8. Right now, if we test that, where is that in HSV? It's an 84, it's not bad. But let's go ahead and crank that up. Oh, crank that up this way. And then the tile is going to be, black. So we're going to raise that up a little bit because nothing is true black. But then I'm actually going to lower this a little bit. We don't want it too reflective. And the last couple of times I've done this, it's actually been too reflective. So we're going to lower that. So this is our reflectivity map. This is our specular face color map. And we'll name this and we will put both of these in there. Gabe, the inverted one is the roughness map that we are going to do now. So, Command A, Command C, Command V. Oh, just Command V, come on. Now, so we need low levels of roughness here, high levels of roughness here. So, what I'm going to do is take this, Command U, Command U. What are you doing here? Oh, it's Command-Shift-U. And then Command I, that inverts it. So, which is perfect. We want this to be fairly dark. We want these lines to be really bright. So, levels. Again, we don't want it to be perfectly white. Yes. Actually, a little bit more like that. And then we don't want this level of smoothness because this is super smooth. So we're actually going to lower this a little bit. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to go back to my spec map. And I'm going to change my mind about something. I'm going to raise that back up. Okay, so this is now our roughness map. So we're going to create a folder for this. I'm just going to name it Rough. Oh, wait, this should be named Ref. Always name your layers, my friends. And let's start saving. My demo depot, ceramic tile floor. I don't like hyphens in my file name. All right, save the PSD, the Photoshop document. All right, let's start saving out our textures. File, save as. Targa. Ah, dang it, I hate that. Ooh. Color. Now, I'm seeing somebody in the chat saying that you're afraid of not doing well with this maps. I'm kind of doing the most advanced thing here, which is creating a specular map and a roughness map in Photoshop. Realistically, you're probably not going to need to do that. You will probably be okay with just color and bump. But in case you need a roughness map, I'm making one. Also, I think making them actually kind of helps some things fall into place in your heads. Because it kind of helps you define what is specularity, what is roughness. And if you guys screw it up or something, I mean, you can always just go back into Photoshop and make changes. So that's spec FC for face color. All right. In theory, I don't need Photoshop, but I always still need Photoshop. So now we're going to go into the Maya side. So let's set my project. Flux. I want to make sure my Flux isn't screwing me. Here we go. We'll just do this one. Oh no, I've already got the corgi there. Is my Maya gonna crash? It's been not cooperating with me all day. For some reason, these old scenes do not want to open. So hopefully open the Hypershade. Okay, now we can teach the class. Sorry, guys. Ridiculous. All right, so what we're going to do, we are going to create a texture for the tile floor, and that is what we're going to render. Actually, I like to create a new camera. And then just rename it Project Cam, something unique. And then we are going to position it where our old camera was. There we are. Where'd Hypershade go? And then I'm going to name this okay. So we're going to start off by opening up the Hypershade. And we're going to take a look at our material that we just created. And we're going to start plugging some stuff in here. We don't have much screen space here. Actually, I'm going to kind of focus more on this and this. So we're going to start off by plugging in our color map. So in our material, we'll go to color. And then we have this file node. And that's where we're going to put our color map. So, problem is, now if we look at our texture, what the heck? I put the cutting board on here? That was silly of me. Tile floor. Our tiles are massive. Look at them. They're so big. So what we got to do is we got to go over to this fourth node here. This is our material. This is our texture node. And this node is called the 2D texture placement node. This controls a lot of how our texture is being read. So with that node selected, let's go into our scene. And we're going to increase the repeat U and V. So we're actually going to go back. Oh, darn it. It's not what I want. Okay. So with this selected, we're actually going to go in and we're going to increase the tiling. So if we increase this to 2, those are still pretty big tiles. Well, let's go to 4. Those are still pretty big. Let's go to 12. Those are too tiny. Well, maybe. Actually, no, 12 is fine. And then we could also rotate our UVs. So we could rotate these by 30 degrees. Yeah, it gives it a nice little look. If we wanted to, we could offset these by like 5. It just moves it. I'm going to leave those at 1 though. Okay. So with all that done, we are ready to do our first RenderMan render on this particular one. So we're going to render camera, and we're going to render from our camera 1, which I swear I renamed. Project Cam. Did I rename you? I thought I renamed you. ProCam. Now, normally I go through these bit by bit so you can see the renders of each one, but I'm a little nervous about how the renderer has been working. So let's go ahead and let's hook up the material the rest of the way, and so you guys can at least see how to do that. So we've got our color map, and all we did with that was we plugged it into our attributes for our color. Next up, I want to plug in our bump map. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to globals. We're going to plug it in right here. Sorry, that's not what we do. I'm a little frazzled. Here you need a utilities node and a 2D bump. And then in there, you plug in the file. And it looks sort of like this. And then here's where we plug in our height map. Now, this value here, you want this to be pretty low, like 0.2. And then we do need to mimic the whole 16, 16. Oh, no, we're going to make this 1. Screw that. So 16, 16, and this was 45. There we go. And then when you plug in the rest of your maps, roughness goes into primary specular. Roughness. Plug this one in here. And then with this one, there's a little trick that you have to do where you go down to color balance and you turn on alpha is luminance. And then in here, we have to take this one, 16, 16, and then we need, of course, to mimic the rotation, so 45. Now, notice primary specular roughness. So the roughness map is a spec map. And also face color is a spec map. So face color is where we're going to plug in the specular face color map. And then there's nothing fancy here. You just have to go to the file and then plug it in here. So that should be everything. Now, normally I would have been testing this bit by bit as we go, but because we haven't done that, I'm not actually sure how this is going to turn out. Let's hope good. Project camera. Did that say Arnold renderer? It did. Let's save our scene. Switch to RenderMan. It's probably that darn bunny that I had to like redo my computer for that stupid bunny burn last week. No. So let's go in and let's make sure all of our preferences are set up. I swear rendering works. It rendered earlier today. So that's set. RenderMan. That's set. That's set. That's set. It should render. Oh, geez. And then it, of course, doesn't. It screwed up. Hang on. It didn't make the bump map properly. There we go. Here's what our texture should look like. Oh, it looks like some of the tiling is off somewhere. Hang on here. See if we can fix that. 16, 16, 16. Wait. One of them had offset. Green. Why is it green? I'm having the worst luck today. This one is set to 1 for some reason. Green means there's a broken channel somewhere. There we go. So there's our texture. Isn't it beautiful? Now, we are running a bit late. I am probably going to edit that like 20 minutes to 45 minutes that we had technical problems out. If you guys are still confused about how to hook up these maps, you can watch the campus lecture, Lecture 8. You can also watch my Q&A from last month where it actually worked. I believe I was really sick, though, so that one wasn't great either. So that's it. That's our floor. Got some noise. Now there is one more thing I'm going to show you, and that is we may not even render it. We'll try, but if Maya crashes, I am done. So I'm going to show you guys how to do the layered texture, which you have to do for the AAA logo, the SAL logo, and the SAL logo. So you have to do this no matter what. So I don't know why these like to be like all spaghetti stringed. Like, there. Wait. Color is the one that should be on the top. Okay. So if you guys are going to do a layered texture, what you want to do is you're going to actually remove the color channel. And then in the material, when you go to make the color channel, you're going to go to color. And when you click on file, oh, that's not what I wanted to do actually. So you're going to make the color channel. Instead of file, you're going to go to other textures. And you're going to use a layered texture. Now, the difference is when you're doing the thermos, you can skip the layered texture part, but you're going to have to do this next part. So over here, this is basically Photoshop layers for Maya. They're kind of sideways, but they work. We're going to drag this in. So this is one layer, and the other one is just green. I mean, we can make it like blue, and then we can lower the alpha so we can actually see our texture. But what we're actually going to do is we're going to plug an image in here. Actually, real quick, let's do something fun. Let's change this one from blue to a checker. So you guys can see now. Where is it? Ta-da! And then we could do like a multiply. So you guys can see the original texture and you can see the silly checkers. Okay. But instead of that, we're going to plug in another texture. So let's plug in our silly little, where do I keep it? I don't think it's here. I have to go get it. Well, I know where it is. Actually, no, I know exactly where he is. Lectures. Oh, that's the Corgi Alpha inverted. There we go. We need the Corgi Alpha. So, well, first of all, now he's huge. So let's go to perspective. We'll be like, we just got one huge Corgi over our entire thing. It's not particularly useful. So what we need is, of course, we need to increase the repeating, right? Okay, well, 24, 24. Now we got a lot of Corgis. So many Corgis. And we're like, okay, but we only want one, so we do this, and then we're like, wait, now we just have one in the corner. This is not at all doing what I wanted. Actually, the problem is, if I want to have free control over where I want that to be, what I want to do is instead, when I create the texture, I want to create it as a projection. This is going to allow me to, this is what we call in games a decal. But this is going to create this little projection image. And I need to actually plug my texture in. Hang on. Corgi Alpha. And so right here, now we got stretching. Okay. So what that is it creates this little thing. And if we rotate it, we can start to see our Corgi come into view. Now, this one does not have any repeating going on over here. What we want to do is we want to wrap the U and we unwrap the V. So now we have one Corgi. And we can freely move it using the projection. We can scale it if we want it to be bigger. Let's actually go back to our project camera. And I can't see the actual thing I want. So we can actually control our little decal now. But we've got a new problem. And that's the fact that we have this like square thing going on here. And so we can go back to our layered texture here. And we can kind of look at this and be like, okay, what's going on? I've got it on multiply. Maybe it should be over. Nope, that just makes everything gray. That's not helpful. Okay, well, multiply actually is what I want. The problem is that this is white, this is black, and this is gray. Notice that when we went to none, we don't want that to be gray, we want that to be white. So let's go back to our texture here, right here. And let's change this default color to white, so it's the same color as the background. Now, if we change this back to multiply, we just have our floating decal. And you guys can do this with the SAL logo. You can do this with the AAA logo for the thermos. And then, hopefully, when we render, Maya won't crash on us. But I'm actually going to bring this alpha down a little bit. Hopefully, when we render, we can render with the Project Cam. Until I was frustrated when I was renaming that. As we can see, yes, that square above is the light projector. I mean, it's the projector. That's literally what it is. And there we go. So you can kind of use that to project your alpha on. It doesn't work with the wine label. The wine label is a different sort of thing. You'll have to watch lecture 10 for that one. We were already well over time, but it was because we had that kind of technical problem, and I didn't want to take time away from you guys. Is there a way to soften the edges of the alpha, or is that hardwired into the image? You can go into the image and soften the edges in the image with a blur. But you can't soften it in Maya. All right, guys, that is it for tonight. I am going to close up. I'll leave it open for like 2 or 3 minutes in case you guys have questions. But for those of you watching the video, I will see you next time. Hopefully there is like a jump cut in the middle and you guys didn't see me trying to open Maya for 45 minutes if you're watching the video. But to those of you who were unfortunately here to watch my frustration, my appreciation to you guys for not getting fed up and leaving. That was frustrating, probably for all of us. I need to do some cleaning of my computer, apparently. But I'm going to let you guys go, and I will hopefully see you in the Discord because it's the last Q&A. Don't forget, deadline is Sunday, not Monday. Bye.